A fourth round of talks between Cuba and the United States has ended. In Washington, negotiators from both countries have been focusing on technical aspects necessary for the reopening of embassies. Major differences between the two sides do remain unsolved. Those include the removal of the more than 50-year blockade that Washington has imposed on the island nation. Despite that, representatives say the dialogue is advancing.
On May 21st and 22nd, the third round of talks between delegations of Cuba and the United States on the process of reestablishment of diplomatic relations and the opening of embassies was held in Washington. The meeting was held in a respectful and professional climate. We have continued to make progress. The Cuban delegation recognized the just decision adopted by President Obama to remove Cuba from the list of states sponsors of international terrorism. These talks were held after the U.S. government, in compliance with its international legal obligations under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, issued a license to a bank to renew banking services to the Cuban interest section in Washington under the conditions of the financial blockade still in force. Both delegations agreed to continue the exchange on aspects related to the functioning of diplomatic missions. During the talks, the Cuban delegation ratified, once diplomatic relations are reestablished, to address its willingness to address substantial matters on the bilateral agenda, including the lifting of the embargo, among others, which would make it possible to move to the normalization of relations between Cuba and the United States on the basis of respect, sovereign equality, and reciprocity.
As you know, the governments of the United States and Cuba have been holding discussions on the normalization of relations since December 17th, when President Obama changed directions in U.S. policy towards Cuba. President Obama and Castro agreed on the historic occasion to restore a relationship severed some 54 years ago and to work towards reestablishment of diplomatic relations and reopening of embassies in each other's countries. Since then, our governments have met regularly and have been in constant contact to define the conditions under which these embassies would operate. This has not been an easy task given our complicated history. On the past 2 days, we met with Cuban officials to discuss the reestablishment of diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba. This round of talks was highly productive. We will persist, inspired by the conviction that engagement and not isolation are the keys to moving forward. We have made significant progress in the last 5 months and are much closer to reestablishing relations and reopening embassies. These are the first steps in the long process of normalization that will allow us to better represent U.S. interests and increase engagement with the Cuban people.